right. We will call the June meeting of the Community Development and Housing General Government Committee to order. We have a full agenda today, in both on general and consent agenda. And at this time, we'll ask, are there any items on the consent agenda that any members of the committee or any of the council members present would like to have pulled? I would just ask C1. Are there any others?
C2.
C2. If there are none other, is there a motion to approve? Councilmember Adams?
I move approval of the balance of the consent agenda.
Say again?
I can't hear one. C47.
C47. Let me pause a second there, if you'll hold on your motion. Say again?
It's incorrect.
C47. Are there any other individuals present here today to speak on any of the items, any of the housing cases that are here? C43. C47, C43. Any additional? C30. Okay. All right.
I'm here to speak on one, but I don't see that.
Do you know the address?
1422 Cameron Avenue.
1422 Cameron Avenue. Somebody pull that number for us. 1422 Cameron. All right. Any other items, any other specific properties that individuals are here to speak to? Going once, going twice. Councilman Adams, your motion?
Again, I move for approval of the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
Mr. Larson?
Can I get clarity that I think C17 was pulled by staff? Do I get a clarification on that? Do we have anybody here from housing? C17 was pulled.
I don't have anything that tells me that.
Yeah, that's
So,
get clarification on.
okay.
Eisner Court.
Yeah.
Can someone? C17? Is that removed from the agenda?
Should be removed.
Okay. All right. There's a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. Absent of the items that have been removed from the consent agenda, all those in favor do so by voting yes. Those opposed do so by voting no. And that is 3 in favor of the consent agenda. And so we'll start with item C1. Item C1.
Item C1, report on potential changes related to news, racks, and city streets.
Just ask this item be pulled just to give update, and I know a couple people in the audience here today and who are here in support of this item, just to give some information.
Sure. Good afternoon. The item today is for informational purposes only. It's a draft of an ordinance that's going to cover the news racks within the downtown area, specifically within the BID, the Business Improvement District only. This matter, as some of you are aware, was initially before this committee in June 2015. The committee at that time wanted some additional feedback from partners within the community, area publishers and whatnot, to get their input. As a result, I had several meetings with local publishers over the last, almost a year or so, to present the ordinance to them, to solicit their feedback, get any kind of opinions they have about its language or what it intends to do. It was a collaborative effort. There was a lot of good feedback from the area partners. So the ordinance itself is intended to regulate the placement and maintenance of news racks on sidewalks and right-of-ways within the BID. I kind of felt like doing that, reduced sort of the compliance burden that publishers may have if this was to be applied throughout the entire city limits. It came about initially from complaints from citizens about how the sidewalks looked with them being overcrowded. The racks, there's a lot of them. They tend to block access to the sidewalk and crosswalks and handicap ramps. This ordinance will will address that in terms of setting locations within the bid where racks can go, and specifically, requiring all racks within the bid to go in what's called a box corral, which is basically a metal frame that can hold, a variety or a variable number of news racks. Additionally, the ordinance, it does go to requiring metal news racks only, as opposed to plastic, allowing plastic ones. Plastic racks are not as durable. They're more prone to break and to tip over and cause a hazard than metal racks are. Worked a lot with the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership on this. They did a good job, Jason Thiel and Ralph Womble, of inventorying where all the news racks currently are within the bid. That map was included with your materials, as well as identifying possible locations where the corrals could go. The intent is not to force publishers out of the bid in terms of where they can place their racks, just to kind of make it neater and safer. And I know that if you have any questions for the partnership, Ralph Womble will speak to that. And I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have about the specifics of the ordinance or kind of where we are right now.
All right. Ralph, would you like to add anything? Name and address for the record.
You ask me to speak, I'll always talk. Really, it's a logical kind of process. We've never had any kind of rules per se. We've had, instances where I know you can't block sidewalks, but if you got 30 newspaper boxes on front of a street and nobody's really looking after it, it blocks the sidewalk. On the business side, we have talked with most, if not all of the publishers, certainly written all of them, to have an opportunity to chime in, and they've been at the meetings. The logic is certainly no publisher could afford to have newspaper boxes on every corner. It's too expensive, the labor's too high, that doesn't make any sense. And so what it boils down to is they want some in certain areas. What's happened is, though, we have some on every corner. And so the idea is to put all of them on one corner in certain areas, so it's all a central location, to have a bracket so the boxes aren't scattered all over the sidewalk, to address the plastic, which breaks, which blows around, which lays around, gets moved, is to have a standard area where you can put it. It is not, certainly the papers would be the first to stand up and say we were limiting their ability to have newspaper racks. It's just we want to contain them in the areas all in the same place. Instead of 4 corners of newspapers of different kinds, have 1 corner. So yeah, that's the intent. And it's just to clean up the sidewalks and clean up the area. And certainly for handicapped people, it makes it a lot easier if they're guaranteed to be off the street.
All right. Could you give your name and address for the record?
Ralph Womble, 635 North Trade Street, 27101.
Are there any questions from the committee or any of the councilmen? Mr. McIntosh?
Not a question, just a comment. I mean, I think, again, it was a very good outreach. It was a long process, and I think the details have been worked out really well. I think the reaching out to the people that will be affected by this always works better. During the process, I know Jason came up with some pictures that showed kind of not a before and after, because we don't have them yet, but what other communities who have done these, what the finished product looks like versus what we have now, which is a mess. And along with our efforts to go after yard signs and other sort of little things, I think it makes a big difference in the overall appearance of the city and what it feels like to walk downtown in Winston-Salem. Asheville and Greenville, South Carolina, and cities that really care about their appearance have done this already, and I think it's high time we do it. So thanks for all your efforts.
Mr. Larson and then Mr. Bessie.
Mr. Womble, as I understand it, any cost incurred in this is actually being incurred through the bid process. Your merchants are paying for this downtown. Any implementation of the corrals?
Cost, be doing what?
The cost of the corrals. Any cost for?
I would hope the city would pay for part of it, and then I can't spend the bid money without a vote. But that would certainly be something that would be.
We should split out or what have you. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Bessie?
This is probably for our attorney. On page 5 of the item, section 74-507B, I was wondering where we took that language from, describing materials that you can't show in racks.
that language comes out of sort of an amalgamation of different Supreme Court cases that have, because governments and municipalities there's, to restrict the time, place, and manner of speech versus the content of the speech are two different things. And so it's that, and 507B deals only with the kind of content that the city could restrict. As of right now, there's nothing that's being published within the bid or anywhere within the city, to my knowledge, that violates that standard. So that's that only kind of limits what can be published and put out for sort of public consumption within publicly available news racks. But it comes from some Supreme Court cases, and if you'd like, I can get you the cites to those.
Eventually, please.
Sure.
It's anytime you do that, it's a litigation nightmare. So somebody will decide to sue.
Well, I hope not, but yeah, it's a pretty well established standard, but you never know.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other? This item is just for information, so we'll be seeing this again in August. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item C2.
Item C2, ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 2, entitled City Council regarding the public comment period.
Mr. Larson, I think that
Yeah,
you...
maybe I just have a very quick question on this. As I understand, what this is doing is it's just cleaning up some wordage about the 30 minutes that are being allotted, 3 minutes for each speaker, and also requesting that somebody that's spoken before on the topic would yield basically to somebody who had not spoken, and that if they could group up, you have one speaker. Is that basically sort of what it is?
Yes, that's correct. What it does is essentially put into the code what has been the practice with respect to the public comment period.
Right.
And the only other thing I think that's really new is the prohibition on showing videos.
Right.
Because of the delay and disruption that has caused them.
Right, so this just codifies. I do have a question, though. Since we are providing a certain amount of restrictions, is there something that can say that we would give priority to the residents of Old Salem? I mean, to Winston-Salem, residents of Old Salem, obviously.
Tell us how you really
Still haven't got, I'm still in the 18th century.
I looked at that issue, and there's no authority for that.
There's no authority.
Not for Old Salem, but for giving city residents.
But for anybody, because we do limit the amount of time, and we limit somebody who's spoken before, but we're not able to give priority. I'm not saying limiting. I'm saying if you only have 30 minutes to speak, and should we not be giving those 30 minutes to citizens of the city that are directly being impacted?
I looked at that and spoke to the league about it and School of Government, and the answer I got back was no. But I'll look at it some more. I don't have.
Could we take a look at that? I know that we have occasions. I mean, not that I don't like people in Louisville and everywhere else, but we have people coming in, and I think we should allow our citizens to speak first, and then the other people that are informed and can help us make decisions. That's great too. But I do want to give full opportunity to anybody in Winston-Salem to have.
Can I ask for clarification? So if a citizen has spoken before and you have a non-resident that hasn't, would you put the non-resident over the citizen that's spoken before?
I would give the citizen of Winston-Salem priority in any case.
Okay.
Mr. Bessie, Ms.
Yeah.
Adams.
I like the idea of trying to give speaking priority to residents of the city. I mean, we do have sort of frequent flyers who do not even live in the county, who come and talk on the same subject time after time. I did have a specific suggestion. It's in paragraph B, where at the end of that paragraph where you say speakers may yield their time to another speaker. Can we add language that clarifies, although in no case shall an individual speaker have more than 3 minutes?
Sure.
Because otherwise I can see somebody collecting chits and saying, okay, I've got 15 minutes.
Okay.
Ms. Adams?
I have no issue with us allowing citizens, but there are thousands of people that work in this city every day. And sometimes it's those people my phone calls come from when they have seen something or something has affected them. And I mean, I would like to see how other cities do this. I don't want us, don't get me wrong, I don't mind being the benchmark, but I always believe we need to go look at other cities and see how they handle it. I don't want us to be known that people that work here, and they might not pay property taxes, but they pay taxes in some kind of form or fashion. And they can be just as helpful to us as to how we run our city. So I'd like the city attorney and staff, if you haven't already, please go look at other cities comparable to us in North Carolina.
I've actually looked at other cities, and there's a chart plus a copy of the other resolutions in some cases just general policies. But again, I'll look at that issue.
Thank you.
Concern expressed.
Mr. McIntosh?
This is not not exactly aligned with this, but it does bring up the public comment period that we had for the community recipients, where we had multiple people from the same organization. I mean, I don't want to cut off that conversation, but a lot of it was very redundant. I almost think in some cases it can work against you. Is there any sort of feeling that we should ask for a limitation there, even if it's just voluntary, at least a notification that we would request that you keep it to a minimum number of people? I'm just floating that.
Mr. Bessie?
I'd love to see a voluntary request that we limit it to no more than 2 speakers per organization.
Right.
We can.
Yeah.
Because it's started with one organization doing this, and now it's 2, and they're both good organizations.
Right. It's nothing
But,
against the
you know,
organization.
You know, they're really eating up the hearing time.
We can add that, and we already send out a request that they, and suggest they come to speak.
Right.
So we can easily add that to the budget.
And maybe just a statement at the beginning of the session. Thanks.
Okay.
This item is an item that's presented for us to adopt. I know there were some comments here now. Are those items that, is there any amendments beyond? I know Mr. Bessie made some suggestions on changes. Is this something that you think you could shape based upon the comments, or would you like to?
Let's bring it back in August.
Okay.
I really want to go back to visit the issue of giving residents priority. I did that at one time with SRG and so forth. I want to talk to them.
Okay. All right. So without objection, we'll hold this item in committee. All right. Is there anything I need to do electronically on this? Okay, I just checked. All right. Moving to item C17, as item here, C17. And I have a question as we're moving to some of the housing items that are presented to staff. I know we did change our time for this meeting to 4, and just a question of notices that went out for the hearing today, whether or not we know for sure that that said 4 o'clock or 4:30. So it did say 4. I just want to make sure. Okay. Okay, just want to be sure. All right. Item C17.
C17. This is, ooh, I lost it.
The one
You lost it. Or
it's the one it's the one we canceled.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's the one we canceled.
That was
C17.
Oh,
that was to remove it.
Hold it.
Yeah.
This one
Yes.
needed to be held.
Staff
what
needs
he
to
said.
remove that to hold.
Yeah,
Okay.
It needs serious work.
All right. So next item is item C30. Item C30.
Greater than 50.
And I believe that there is a Alberto Sadavo who's here to speak on that as well. Item C30.
Yes, this particular case is 1260 Wartown Street, the complainant notice.
Rich, 815
No,
Rich
this is
Avenue.
Rich Avenue. But the complainant notice of hearing was issued on February the 4th of 2016. The hearing was held the following week. The owner
I'll come back and forth.
has been making repairs to the property. This is how it looks.
Okay.
Kind of spread.
However, it is in the plus 50.
Which item number is this?
C30.
C30. Thank you.
30.
It is in the plus 50% category, which qualifies it for demolition category.
Okay.
So when the original order was issued, the owner did not respond to the hearing. The finding and order was issued in March of 2016. The dwelling became eligible for demolition in October of 16 under the 6-month rule. Currently, we have the as-is value, fair market value at $9,800, and the estimated cost to repair is $4,285. And I apologize, it is in the minus 50% category.
Okay. All right, Mr. Sandavo, would you like to come and speak to this property? You both can come. Yes,
She
you can
can-
come. Yeah.
You dropped something. You're welcome.
Yes, actually, I'm working in the house, but I work but inside. I have some pictures, but inside is almost completed remodeling. Just outside, I live, but I had actually the materials for to do a complete repair outside.
Okay. From staff, question, the pictures that we have, are these, the date of the image, it says 8/15 on these images. Besides the ones here, this is dated for today?
Yes, it's for today, I think so.
And so you're, based upon our action today, we would issue an order, and that order would give you, what is it, how many days?
90 days.
90 days. It will give 90 days to repair. And do you think that you can have the items listed repaired within 90 days?
Yes, sure.
All right.
Sí, yes, I already have some complaint list here. Is that one? And already started with that one. Just the paint is not finished by outside, but just I need to paint white and around to the windows, repair or replace the window because somebody broke the window too. But yes, it's just paint and replace the gable or the porch area. So I had all materials now, so I can start that one and do the repairs.
Okay, so what we will do today, this is a property that's in the ward in which I represent, and also my neighborhood. I live in the same neighborhood as well. And so our action today would pretty much give you 90 days to repair that. And if it's not repaired within 90 days, then that would be the action that would take place. And so you're saying yes, that you would be able to complete it in 90 days?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sure. 90 days is enough. 2 months, it's enough. Yes.
Okay. All right. So what is the pleasure of the committee?
I was going to give him a chance. You can
I
make
can motion.
Make a motion.
and
You
I'm
want me to
second.
motion?
All right, Mr. Bessie has moved and second by Ms. Adams to approve the item as it stands. It will give you 90 days to make the repairs on this property, and I'll ask that before you leave, make sure you get in touch with staff just so you can make sure that they follow along with you. All those in favor, do so by voting yes. Those opposed, no. All right, that's unanimous. So if you make sure you touch base with staff, you have 90 days to repair it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to item C43. Item C40? Oh.
40 and then 43.
Do I have Cameron? Oh, yes, I'm sorry, C40. Yep, item C40.
Yes, this particular item is referencing 809 North Cameron Street. The owner is listed as Clara Owens Cloud. The complainant notice of hearing was issued in January of 2013. At that time, there was a hearing that was held. No one attended the hearing. The order was issued in April of 2013, and the time for compliance expired in August of 2014. It became eligible for demolition under the 6-month rule in January of 2015. The estimated cost to repair the properties we have is $3,911, and the fair market value is $930. This property is in the plus 50% category, and if an ordinance is demolished, it would be to demolish and remove within 90 days.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do have a picture.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to mine.
Yeah, that's a cute little house.
And is there someone here to speak to this property, C40, 809 North Cameron Avenue? 809 North Cameron Avenue.
Well,
1422 is not on. 1422 is not on.
no.
Yeah.
It's not one that we probably have prepared if it's not in there.
Nope.
Okay, so this is not to be,
So we'll find out what's going on. If we could go to the next one, please.
oh, well,
Well, you got
if
to
there's,
act on it.
yeah, we have to, yeah, so we're gonna approve, yeah.
On the one you just
809.
Oh, here's another.
Okay, so based upon this item, well,
I'm,
maybe if you all could have that conversation outside, excuse me, just a point of order. If you all need to have that conversation, you can step outside. We want to move forward with this one. So on this item C40, it doesn't appear, me it appears that was not the right item pulled.
I had C43, and maybe I misheard.
I know.
Yeah, now I wrote C43 down as well.
We've got that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think C40 was pulled by mistake because it was Cameron Avenue.
correct.
okay,
But I had a question.
okay.
Why is the market value listed so low? $5,000, you don't see much wrong with the house itself.
That's why I asked you all to appeal those tax values, Mr.
That
Brooks.
market value is established by the city's real estate supervisor, Mr. Kirk Borling. So I have not been in conversation with him. That would be a question I would have to ask him why he listed it as that.
All right, Mr. McIntosh?
What efforts were made to contact the owners on these?
The owners would have been contacted by certified regular mail and posting the property.
This is one of those ones that's really frustrating to me because this looks like a really salvageable house, and I'd hate to see it go under a bulldozer because this is, to me, this is perfect housing. And I don't know what the inside looks like, but based on the outside, I've seen and restored much less damaged houses. But we really don't have any tools to go get this house, do we? To own it, to take it from the current ownership.
How long have
I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to press this be held in committee while we get a response on the valuation.
I don't disagree with it, but I know for a fact that this property has sat vacant in this neighborhood for an extended period of time. It's degraded in reference to the way that the railing and stairwells have happened over a period of the last at least 2 years for sure, in the way in which it has continued to decline in the property there. I don't argue against trying to have a better understanding of the value of the property itself, but I just know for a fact how this specific property has been in consistent decline in the neighborhood over a period of time. And to Mr. Brooks, I'll ask the question, do you think that in terms of taking a step back and evaluating the value proposition on this property, how might you all do that?
We will get with the real estate supervisor, and if need be, we could always have it appraised. That would be the, I guess, certain way of getting at what the true value may be. All of our, pardon?
I can look for other options too, in response to your question.
Thank you. But again, I think it needs to happen pretty quickly. since it's been an ongoing issue.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the reason the valuation is relevant is because, so far as we can tell from the photographs, the structure is completely sound. The damage is this front, these front steps.
Yep.
And if it were if it were the type of value that, you know, I'd think off the cuff you'd expect to see from a sound structure with a damaged walkway, then the cost of repair would be far less than would make it eligible for in-rent. And it's not because the value placed on the house is so low. I mean, if there's a solid reason why that's been done, I don't want to mess with it. But if it's just a lowball valuation, then I'd question whether we want to, you know, consider acquiring and fixing it up. You know.
Yeah, and that's not, I'm not opposed to it, and so we can take some time to look at it. But I will say, as a council person of the word and one who lives in the same neighborhood with this property, that it has been in a declining state for some period of time. But to the proposition of the value itself, I think that goes into many conversations we've had in the last few weeks, and this again goes back to that very same consideration. But I'll ask that we will hold this, if there's no objection, as we hold this in committee, ask two questions, one a question of value, and then also the question raised by Mr. McIntosh in reference to alternate legal options within acquisition of the property. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. Item C43.
Item C43 is
740 East Devonshire.
740 East Devonshire Street. The owner is Mr. Rhodes, as he announced himself earlier, and this notice of hearing was issued in April of 2013. It became eligible for demolition in April of 2014. Mr. Rhodes spoke with me at the beginning of the meeting and advised that he is in the process of having it demolished himself, and he's just requested a maximum of 90 days in order to get that demolition completed.
So our action today would essentially give him the time necessary to do that.
Yes.
Okay. This property is in the southeast, but so this action, and Mr. Rhodes, you're okay with that? Okay. All right. Is there? There's already a motion. Who made the motion?
I did.
All right. Mr. Bessie made the motion. Seconded by Councilmember Adams. All in favor, do so by voting when it appears on your screen. All opposed? That's unanimous. All right, item C47. Item C47.
Item C47 is owned by Mr. Richard Miller. The complainant notice of hearing was issued in July of 2014. Records indicate that no one attended the hearing. The order was issued the following month. It became eligible for the demolition consideration under the 6-month rule in July of 2015. It's in the plus 50 category. We have the fair market value at $4,100 and the estimated cost to repair the property at $4,368. If adopted, the order would be to have it demolished and removed within 90 days.
All right, I know Mr. Miller is here. Will you give your name and address for the record?
Richard Miller, 626 North Trade Street. two things on here. Question the value, which means I'm overpaying taxes, and y'all owe me some tax money back because I paid considerably more on the tax value of this property, and it is currently valued by the tax office considerably higher. The repairs on this property, obviously, there's some confusion out of the housing service office. My letter says less than 50%. The repairs on it are about $750, my estimate, for my repair guys. Some broken window panes, a storm door, and some handrails, and a defective gable vent, which I don't even understand why that's an unfit item, because it doesn't have anything to do with safety or health. This property was vandalized. It's been repaired several times. It was vandalized for the last time in 2014. Vandals tried to break in it and tried to burn it, but they didn't succeed, didn't even do any damage inside. However, I question the valuation, and I question why it's in the plus 50 when it's a $750, $800 repair item. Also, VDAs are not being returned. I've done VDAs on some other properties. They've not been signed. They've not been sent back. I've already got one property that's been complied with earlier, got another one that should be complied with today from earlier actions. So I've got some issues with, here it says plus 50. Here, they're sending me minus 50. This is less than 10% of that. And it's a brick house. And $4,000 value, somebody's on something bad, because these should be appraised by competent appraisers, and they're not being appraised properly. They're not being valued by competent people who are authorities, because if they were, then the tax office needs to be cutting the tax value, because I can assure you, I can show you the tax cards, they're considerably more than that.
Well, Mr. Miller, thank you for your comments. I would first say that I wouldn't speak that way about city staff first, but secondly, I've looked up the tax value. The tax value, according to the county, is $9,100 on this property. I'm not asking for a response yet, but that's what's on the county's website for the tax value for the property.
Right, but that's considerably more than four.
Oh, just a second. And so, that's what just for the committee and its evaluation on the property itself. Do you think? What's your plan? So what do you intend to do?
Oh, it'll get repaired. Are we still doing this under the 120-day with the VDAs, or what? Are we still have that option, or
what do you need?
120 days. I'm in process of working on other properties that we've been, we've worked on. We've gotten two cleared. I've just got with Angela to make sure the first one was cleared, and it's been taken off record, and we're working on them in order. Okay. And this one, it probably needs to be 120 days, because then that would back us up with other stuff that we're currently working on now. It does need to be 120 days. And that's what I'm under the assumption, working under that assumption.
Well, you can't assume you'll get that now, so don't want you to make that assumption that it is a decision of this committee and then full council whether or not that is granted, although there are options such as that.
Right.
So from the committee or any president, any questions of Mr. Miller or staff in reference to this property? Mr. Larson.
Mr. Miller, has anybody been in this house inspections?
Nobody has inspected it in a long time.
Okay, so we don't even know what the inside looks like at this point.
No, it's probably just painting and cleaning at this point there on this property.
Okay.
And I have asked about loan programs. I've not heard anything back. I'd like to hear more about that and see what's available for property owners.
Okay. Mr. Brooks, what in terms of the timing and repair? Councilman, this is in Northeast Ward, and so Councilman Burke isn't here to speak on behalf of it specifically, but your thoughts in terms of the action here, 120 days, 90-day action, what is your thought from staff?
The 120-day was offered earlier for individuals who had agreed to sign the voluntary demolition agreement. Mm-hmm. And if you're consistent, I guess that would still apply. If he's willing to sign a voluntary demolition agreement, he would have the 120 days. Otherwise, he would have the 90 days.
Okay. Is there, Mr. Bessie?
I'm prepared to make a motion to approve an order to repair or demolish with the BDA option.
Okay. If the VDA is signed. Okay. So we're clear on that? All right. There's a motion, a second. Mr. Miller, you understand?
Yes, sir, I do. As long as I can get a copy of it back, I've got a copy of it back. That's all
Okay.
I ask.
Okay. All right. All in favor of the motion is to approve as is 90-day unless there's a VDA signed, which gives the 120-day. If a VDA is signed, there's 120 days. If not, it is the 90-day demolition order. All in favor? Vote yes.
Can we add just the time frame in which the VDA has to be signed and returned, if you don't mind?
What is the pleasure of council?
2 weeks.
2 weeks to sign the VDA?
Yeah,
Is that
as long as it's by the first of, I would say the first of July, good. That's just a little over 2 weeks, by the first of the month. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I believe that's the period we've been telling folks.
within 2 weeks
They return it.
of action to council? Okay. Is that fine with the motion and seconder? All right. All in favor when it appears on your screen? Vote yes in favor, vote no, or abstention. That is unanimous. All right. Seeing that, are there any other individuals present to speak to property items on tonight's agenda? There are none other that have been pulled, but are there any others here to speak to any other property item? Okay. All right. With that, we will return to the general agenda, beginning with item G1.
Item G1, information regarding recreation and parks utilization plans.
All right. We have our Parks and Recreations Director here with us who will lead us in this item.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I was tasked to, as part of my one of my work assignments, was to look at the utilization of 4 recreation centers. We've taken this approach as to use it as a model to look at attendance, programming, what we do well, what we don't do well, and looking at ways to improve our service delivery to the citizens of Winston-Salem. I did not have the electronic PowerPoint as part of your package, so I believe all of you should have the slides in front of you. So I'm going to go through those and then take questions at the end. General information that you would typically find with our recreation centers are the hours of operation, Monday through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., Fridays 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturdays and Sundays our recreation centers are typically closed unless there are special events, rentals, or programmed recreational activities at those locations. Or organizational structure, typically what you would find at a recreation center that's fully staffed, is a senior recreation center supervisor, assistant recreation center supervisor, recreation leader, and a playfield leader. Typically, that's what you would find at all recreation centers, but we did have locations, for instance, at Polo, where we had additional staff because of the level, the attendance and the level of programming. We wanted to make sure that that center was properly staffed. If you look at the attendance ending in fiscal year 2015, you can see that several of our locations, some of our larger recreation centers, more popular recreation centers, do get utilized much more frequently than some of our smaller centers. Look at Sprague Street, 14th Street, and Carl Russell are 3 of the 4 of our lowest attended recreation centers. Polo Park is on the kind of the other end of the spectrum with a lot more attendance. There's been a history of established programming there at that recreation center for years. Staff has done a really good job there, and that speaks to why the attendance levels are where they are for that particular recreation center.
That's in the Northwest Ward, right?
Yes, Councilmember, it is. When you look at just attendance and recreation center, we want to make sure that we look at pay attention to the different demographics that could be, that are using the recreation centers. And the 3 different age groups that we typically track and target are youth, we look at teens, and then we look at adult programming. You can see that at Sprague Street, we typically have more adults that are using that facility, and that's due to some of the late night basketball. That's where the majority of those numbers are coming from. We do have a lower youth and teen programming, given the overall spectrum of the three different demographics that use the facility. Polo is very similar. What you'll find is that the ratio of youth and teen to adult programming is pretty consistent, with the exception of the number of people, number of participants in the actual programs themselves. One of the other factors that we look at in terms of programming and attendance at recreation centers are the hours of use. Typically, you'll find that the mornings are typically, we have most of our senior programming and adult bridge clubs, things of that nature that are using the recreation centers in the morning. We have youth and teen programs going on in the afternoon. And some programming in the evening, which you will find typically, which would be your adult programming. A lot of that's due to open gyms, late night basketball programs, volleyball, and other structured activities for adults in the evening. To better understand what types of programs that we offer at those particular locations, we have to look at the cultural makeup of the surrounding neighborhoods. And what we did was look at a 1 mile radius, which was in a lot of instances within walking distance to the recreation center. At Carl Russell, you have a predominantly African American population. That is the same for 14th Street and somewhat for Sprague. What you will find, though, is that at Sprague Street, we do have a large Hispanic population, and we've begun to introduce new programs to engage that particular demographic, to get them engaged into the recreation center. At Polo, you have a predominantly Caucasian or white surrounding within a 1 mile radius of that recreation center. And what we find is that that particular cultural difference impacts the use of the facility. What you'll find is that a lot of it's not that the people aren't there and they're not interested. What we found in speaking with some people out around Sprague is that they, in a lot of instances, are because of the language barriers, feel that they don't feel as comfortable coming to the recreation center. And so those are things that we'll look at in the near future to bridge that communication gap with users in the community.
Excuse me, I can make a comment. So Polo, that's the demographic of the surrounding neighborhood. That's the racial makeup of the. It's not the people who use the facility. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Polo. My kids play there,
right.
And to me, the breakdown is much closer than that graphic shows. I mean, it just seems.
Well, for the users of the facility, yes,
right.
we just looked at the population of around within a 1 mile radius of the facility. It's not indicative of the users actually inside the center right. using it.
Thanks.
What we found is that given there's a relationship between the demographics around the recreation centers and the income levels of those people living around the centers. At Carl Russell, the highest number is moderate, between $30,000 and $75,000 of income. 14th Street, as shown in the graph, is either below poverty or low income. And again, we began to look at our programming, what types of programming we're offering at those locations, whether they're fee-based, whether they're not fee-based, in order to engage the community and make sure that we're offering programs that people can actually use, and that we're not pricing ourselves out of being able to offer the community a quality level of service. In our recreation centers, what you'll find typically in our recreation centers are meeting rooms, game rooms, computer labs, kitchens, gymnasiums. At 14th Street, there's a boxing ring. We'll have playgrounds. We have multi-purpose fields. And we have at Polo and at Sprague Street, we have swimming pools. That's the very typical makeup of a recreation center. Although we have gone in some instances at which weren't part of the study, but at Sim Center and at Haynes Hodge, where we've taken the game rooms, where we typically would have a ping pong table, pool table, maybe a foosball table, and maybe some card tables, something like that, so people can play cards. We've taken those out and added actually video games, stand-up, corn-out video games that are free for the public to use. So even though it's a game room, they may differ across the city in terms of what that game room actually offers. We've also looked at, in some areas, we've created libraries, like at 14th Street. We've taken a space at 14th Street that wasn't really being used and created a library for after school program. Yes, Councilman.
I had an overall question. This is only a subset of the centers that Recreation and Parks operates.
Yes, sir.
Is this a particular breakdown, size, or why did you select? Why are you studying only the handful that are in here?
They are some of the recreation centers where we have, 3 of the centers are where we know we have challenges with participation. And if you look at Polo, what's there works. And so we're looking at the differences and the similarities of what's working at Polo, what's working at Miller Park, what's working at Haynes Holdry in terms of attendance and being able to draw people in and keep them, and looking at some of our centers where we aren't doing a good job at attracting not just the repeat customers, but what I like to refer to as unique visitors, those people who haven't visited the center. And so we kind of taken what works at Polo and some of these other centers, document those efforts and see what we can do at some of the centers where we don't have that level of participation, see what changes we can make.
So in the annual attendance data, you only looked at 9 of the city's facilities.
We took the 9. We listed those. We have 17. It was just too much to present in the presentation. So we did look at we do have data for all of our recreation centers, and I can get that data to you.
Okay, I would be interested in that, but I'm also interested in why you selected those 9 to focus on in your comparative data.
There wasn't any particular reason. We just looked at the attendance from the first 9 that were going that we listed or had the data for. There wasn't any other particular logic behind why those were shown. We just know that we have variable attendance numbers. Some of the other centers have some of these very similar attendance, and that was just the range that we chose to provide for this.
I mean, obviously, we all have geographic areas we represent, and there will be some of our facilities that are in here and some that aren't. So I'd like to see the data for Little Creek and perhaps even Bolton.
Right.
In addition to Miller, which is
right. I can get that data for you, and I can provide that to you.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams.
Mr. Royston.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being our Recreation Parks and Recs Director.
Thank
I
you.
know you're relatively new at your position. I think, maybe a year? Maybe?
Less than a year.
Yes, than a year. It's no secret how I feel about Parks and Recs. I'm very passionate, but I also believe, as you know, I believe in the city providing what we say we're going to provide and do what we say we're going to do. And I know you probably have reasons, and I'm sure you can get this information later. I'm not going to press you to give me answers. But 2015 data versus 2016 data, I'd like to know why. No, you don't have to answer. I always tell people, I give people an opportunity to go do your homework. Tell me why. Mr. Councilmember Bessie already asked about the selection, but then even out of the 9 you presented, you landed on 4. And I guess that again was maybe your reasoning was to give us a snapshot of programs in attendance at 4 that basically mirror, I guess, the other 13, right?
The original study started several years ago, and the reasoning why those centers were selected, my response to that is based on input that I've received from staff, and when we asked a very similar question. These were the recreation centers that, from staff standpoint, we felt, and we heard that there were complaints or issues or things that we need to make improvements on at those locations. We, for instance, at 14th Street, it's one of those recreation centers where attendance has historically been low. That's what the appearance would show if you drove by the recreation center. But what you would also find is that there are a lot of people who use the recreation center who will walk there. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the most accurate data, and that we were looking at centers and looking at locations where we know that we can make an impact and make some improvements and begin to reach out and touch those people and draw them into the center, those people who aren't using the recreation center or our programs at those locations, and use those as a model. If those are the more difficult ones to make adjustments to, then we can make very similar adjustments easier at other locations.
And I guess when I look at Polo, to me, don't get me wrong, outside of some infrastructural improvements, Polo doesn't need any help. Polo is Polo. They got a pool, they got a strong program of adult things and community things. But, you know, when I look at, like you said, 14th Street and Martin Luther King in my ward and Brown Douglas in my ward, you know, I've been saying for years, again, it's the programming, and it's programming versus cultural makeups of the communities. Back when I was growing up, there were Parks and Rec, yeah, it was 24/7 type programming that the community could connect with. And I've said since I've been on this council that there was never a connection to the urban core in the poor neighborhoods where African Americans and Latinos live that connected to the taxpayers and the people in those neighborhoods.
Ms. Adams, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to, if we were going to move through the rest of the presentation, and then we could put the other questions or comments.
And I hear you, Chairman Montgomery, but I just wanted to make my 2 or 3 clear that I've said before over and over. I appreciate what you guys are doing, but I think, again, you might want to circle around and talk to the council members about what it is that we think these recreations may need centers to be better. Okay.
Yeah, Councilman, this is a like a 30,000-foot level view of what's going on, and we can't. It'd be very ill-advised of me to try to begin to make any kind of improvements or shuffling staff without fully understanding what the problem is.
And I understand that. That's why I thought it would be a good idea to have some engagement with the council members.
Yes, ma'am. And as we work through and begin to actually iron out solutions, we will be meeting with council members in each ward with our proposals and get to make sure that we have your input before we move forward with any changes. Moving on, in terms of the programming, typically our programming has been based on community interest, trends. It is seasonal. We do look at different age groups and the environment in which and where the centers are located and the environment surrounding the recreation center. For example, the types of programs that we currently offer, they're seasonal and non-seasonal summer camps, after school, child care, social groups, support groups, educational classes, club meetings. We do athletics. We have dances, cooking, and fitness. In looking at what we feel that staff is doing well, we have a heavily populated location with high traffic potential. Costs and our fees are low for our programs that we offer in comparison to other locations. We have abundance of room and space to offer for a variety of activities. We do have experienced staff. There's an established base of programming that we have an established core of people that we're able to serve. We do have computer labs, and we work with our IS department, and we have Winston-Net at all of our recreation centers. Most of our recreation centers are accessible to provide great accessibility to public transportation, and we've developed partnerships, internal and external, with outside organizations where if there was a particular need or program that we weren't offering, we sought partnerships with other groups, allowed them to come into our recreation centers and provide that programming for us. Some of the things that we have identified as weaknesses, it kind of goes without saying, some of our facilities are outdated. We do have some staff shortage, some staffing issues at some locations. One of the things that we're going to have to really work hard at is the actual perception that people have when visiting our recreation centers. Signage, there's poor visibility. Lighting is deficient in some locations. Historically, the demographics in the neighborhoods have changed. Our programming hasn't changed with them. There's a subpar market in terms of those that haven't actually having a good base of people to reach. There's a perception of security and just surrounding what I would call the curb appeal. As you approach a recreation center, just like as you would a house, the curb appeal is the first impression that you're going to get. So we feel that that's something that we need to begin to identify what those problems are and look at solutions to address them. We feel that there are opportunities for community and agency-based partnerships, volunteers, quality programs at affordable pricing. We feel that we can provide programming for all of those different demographics and the sub-demographics of those particular groups. We've been working diligently with our marketing department to do digital advertising, so we're looking at creative ways to do marketing for our programs and facilities. We've begun to, using our own staff, make updates to the interiors of some of our facilities to make them a little bit more appealing for people to use. We've started offering several types of different computer classes for seniors, for young adults and youth. We begin to look at program development based on nationwide trends and what other municipalities are doing, what they're doing well, and looking at employment opportunities for contracted instructors. We think there's a great opportunity for that, to continue those relationships. Some of the challenges that we'll have as we begin to move forward is some of our competitors have much newer, more modern facilities. The capital investment that would be needed in some of our recreation centers to really make an immediate impact. They have advanced technology, duplication of programs with nearby competitors, other youth and athletic programs, Alpha by the Y, AAU, churches and clubs, changes in the housing market, facilities perceived as being unsafe, parking is an issue, and language and cultural barriers for our growing Hispanic population. We've identified some short-term goals and long-term goals to be able to address these challenges. We're going to begin to work with our IS department and have an online survey that the residents at those particular recreation centers can be able to fill out, and we'll be able to gain input on year-round. Look at updating the interiors of our facilities and the exterior, signage, improve the safety, train employees, increase our diverse programming, and increase our contractual programs. Long-term goals would be to make sure that our recreation centers are adequately staffed, extended hours of operation, develop partnerships, provide accessibility for those persons with disabilities, develop marketing plans for the recreation centers, and increase our use of technology in the way that how technology can be used to make our facilities become and operate much more efficiently. At this point, I will take any questions that the committee may have.
All right. No, Councilman Adams, I will go back to you. I know you had some comments.
Again, make sure you, and I hope you will, benchmark other recreation departments across the state or the country, because we haven't done the programming piece in many, many years here in Winston. The complaints I get from most people when I visit recs or their kids or anything, they don't even feel that there's even a need for these recreation centers outside of sports programs. Over half the kids, if not more, they don't play sports. They play games of sport, but they don't play basketball. One of the other things is to get the survey and to get a good survey results, I would think you might want to ask some of the nonprofit organizations that utilize our facilities to meet. They're always looking for opportunities to add to their volunteer hours on their national levels organizations. We also recognize those volunteers that do things like this for us. I would ask volunteer organizations to engage some of the survey engagement at these centers and stand out there and actually talk to my seniors that come in every day or my challenged people who don't feel comfortable using a computer, and even with the young people, just asking a straight up 1, 2, 3 and you're done. Because if we're waiting again on people to give us surveys, results, every time we do something online, it won't happen. It just won't happen. But again, I'm all for it. We just need to be better at this one. We're either going to do like the municipalities with small towns. Eventually, this will be a service we may not provide across the city at 17 recreation centers, and the council will have to deal with that as to which ones we may have to contract out to nonprofit organizations and community groups and churches to run their programs out of it. Because right now, part of what we do, that might not be it for us, and we need to face up to that fact.
Timely study, thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other? Mr. Larson?
I'd like to thank you for pulling this together. I know you're new on the job, and this provides a good baseline. I would share Councilman Bessie's request that maybe the more comprehensive view of all of the sites, if you've done this bore down, rather than selecting just the 4 or so that we looked at in depth, if that could be put on a site somewhere that we could get to, instead of sending it to each of us, we could have that database to look at. I do applaud your effort to market the parks. I think that advertising and branding our parks is a primary directive. I know you and I have talked about that, but certainly signage is a key issue. I am concerned about long-term maintenance as we add facilities, and you seem to be addressing that, beginning to look at the issue of how we're keeping up these facilities and what it's going to cost in the long run. I would appreciate a mapping by district, or by ward rather, of where all of these facilities are, so they can be keyed into the narrative that you produce on the website. And if you could just include that maybe on your sort of site selection in some way. Is that feasible to do all of that I'm asking?
Yes, actually, a lot of what you're asking for already have. So if we could have that mapping, if we could have a look then at the database that you provided for the 4 sites universally across all the ward centers, then that gives us a basis. Because I think what we're moving toward here is really the question of how we're going to continue to use and develop these sites through time, and the investment we have in them, and where we may be coming up short in providing these facilities equally throughout the city. What you'll find overall basically as a summary is that there was a time when we offered programs that everybody was interested in, but as the trends changed and time changed, we didn't change with them as quickly as we could have, and now we're playing catch up. And but before we begin to make an overhaul, look at doing an overhaul of our recreational programming, we have to be able to identify the problems, so that the solutions that we're proposing are intelligent ones and ones that will work.
All right.
We learned about that in pickleball, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
We did.
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. McIntosh. Okay, well, on this item, this one I've been looking forward to for a long period of time, Mr. Manager. You are well aware. I've been asking for and continue to look for, in terms specifically when we're looking at park and recreation facilities. I am one who believes that every one of our recreation centers needs to have a business plan. It needs to have a specific understanding for what are the offerings, understanding of that community, understanding in competition what exists in that neighborhood and community, regardless of if it has the highest number of individuals in it or it has the lowest number of individuals in it. If you don't have a plan, you get left behind, regardless of how well you're doing at the time. And I had already written down 21st century recreation facilities before you mentioned about being left behind. I think that's part of the challenges in terms of how do we continue to develop an engagement when we think about recreation and parks facilities. And so when we begin to look at the data here that's been presented, I think it's a good start. I think, again, a more comprehensive picture of the total city. It gives a better picture of what's happening, what's going on. But then I think some of the demographic information presented helps put some things in perspective on what type of things could potentially work or could be challenging at certain recreation facilities because of the demographic that exists there, and then being willing to do what's necessary to provide that type of program, as you have already reflected in some of the recommendations of whether it's partnering with others to help provide that through contractual work. But I'm not certain what the, in terms of the the question of additional investigation and research, of pulling together a total understanding of that's something that's going to be done internally, and you see that happening within what time frame of kind of really taking evaluation, what we have, what we're looking at, and then really coming back with these are some things that we think we want to do differently or better within our rec centers. How is that something this year, next year? What do you think you could the department would have something like that?
I think that one of the, what we would, to get the kind of information that you're asking for is basically to kind of look at a programming master plan, very similar that you would look to do like a master plan for a park, where you basically, you go through everything that we offer, everything that we do with the fine-tooth comb, and they basically, an outside consultant could develop those plans and with that level of detail in which you're speaking. It's something that I would talk with Mr. Page and the manager's office on to see if that's something that we can pursue this year. It's something that I believe an outside consultant, it's the type of expertise that they need to provide to us. We don't have the level of expertise in-house to do that level of study, but we could guide that process with no problem. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Councilmember.
Well, I don't, and I have written down in terms of consultant, in terms of the type of time necessary to put into that. But when we start just kind of thinking about individual facilities and certain things there, I think that there are no better people equipped with the knowledge than those who are already on the ground. Consultants can help bring some of those outside thoughts into the process of what could potentially work or could work in similar scenarios in other places. But to understand that community and those individuals there, I would hope that our team and staff are knowledgeable of enough of what's happening in those communities to be able to at least put some pen to paper on certain things and then depend on others to help fill in some of the gaps that are there. But again, I said this is, I think, a good start of going in that direction of understanding. But, you know, and you mentioned 14th Street one, and that's one for me that I really think you have a plethora of people in and around that center itself, but it's challenged in terms of participation, others in terms of what is actually engaging both the very young youth population in that neighborhood and community, and also the senior population in that neighborhood and community. And I think that we even in that one, just for instance, I think there are opportunities being missed. I think there are other areas like that we can take a look deeper. And as you already mentioned, there'll be some conversation with council members and others as we move forward. And that, Mr. Manager, I'll look forward to how we continue to have that engagement. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Councilmember Adams, I'm going to yield the next two items over to you.
Yes.
There needs to be a motion here for.
I move that we excuse Councilmember Montgomery from the G2 and G3.
Second.
All in favor?
I was waiting on Is it coming up? I made the motion, Councilmember Bessie seconded it, and we're voting yes, and there's one, would you say abstain? No. One abstention, one abstaining, and 2 for. Next item, please, G2.
Item G2, resolution authorizing submission of continuum care homeless grant application, acceptance of grant funds, and execution of agreements.
Mr. Brooks, could we have a small review?
Yes. This particular item authorizes submission of the COC grant application for 2017. HUD announced the notice of funding availability will be published on June 17. This item authorizes staff, of course, to submit an application for that funding. The funding is estimated to be, as shown on Exhibit A, which I believe is about $2.1 million. And we have a list of the existing projects that can apply for renewal, or if we receive bonus money or some reallocations of funds, other projects can be funded. And there's an appropriate resolution attached for your review.
Any comments or questions from the committee? I didn't see.
way over
Councilmember
here.
McIntosh.
Okay. Mr. Brooks, I attend some of these meetings, and I got to admit, I'm bewildered. I mean, there's a bunch of different organizations with using a bunch of different acronyms and things. From an overall standpoint, the Continuum of Care is a nonprofit organization that is funded by federal money that comes through the city.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. So there is a group that the Continuum of Care is this group of agencies, right, that all participate and are all funded by that.
That's correct, and the member agencies are attached on the
Okay.
back.
I saw that, but it didn't. One thing I thought this was missing was how much money do each of these organizations get? I mean, what size players are there?
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A.
I missed that.
That's on Exhibit A.
Combination.
No, I'm talking about per group. So each one of these organizations on Exhibit B get a dollar amount allocated to them, I would assume.
At some point or another, they may get them, but they are not all funded every year.
Correct.
With our funds, with these funds that we get as a pass-through.
But we would have a list of what in 2016,
Yes.
last year's budget, what each of these groups. I'd like to see that
Okay.
at some point, and I'm going to continue to attend these things just because it's. I mean, on the one hand, I've gotten enough of a sense of what is done through the organization. I think it's really powerful and really helpful, but it's also bewildering. So I need to get my arms around it a little bit better.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Any more comments?
Just a quick comment for clarification. The Continuum Care is a grant
Yeah.
as opposed to an organization. The organization that
Yes.
does overview, in addition to the city on the funding, is the United Way actually has an overview function.
Okay.
For they have a particular project that's housed within their structure that does that. So,
Fair to say it's Byzantine.
yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, I'm equally baffled by it. Under this Appendix A, Exhibit A, where it says number 1, lists Bethesda Center, Experiment Self-Reliance, Family Services, Goodwill Industries. Each of those are going to be funded under this grant, which amounts to $981,000. Is that what we're saying? But we don't have the amount that Family Services is going to get out of that $981,000. Is that where we are? That has not been determined yet, or what? Am I misreading the document here?
I believe this list represents current funding, correct? Yeah, current funding.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim West from Community Development Department. Good to see you
Good afternoon.
all. And so we have aggregated these by types of project, and the funding here is based on existing funding. We can, as you asked, provide those amounts for the current grants and give you that breakout. And there is a small provision for bonus funding, which would be, we estimated about $90,000 is the new money that could go into all of this. And it would be for these same types of projects, so we can break this out for you some more if you'd like to have it.
Chairman, may I? Yeah, thank you. This is an important, obviously a very important safety net in our community, but I do think it'd be useful to break it out. This is all federal funded though, right? Is that where this is? Is this the money we've been talking about is uncertain after September of this year? Is this money threatened? Do we know?
No, it's not.
It's not threatened, so we're pretty well assured that this budget will be solid through the next fiscal year. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any more comments?
Question, actually.
Yes, Councilman Bessie.
There are budget proposals that would affect this level of funding, aren't there?
From the federal level?
Yeah.
This is FY17 money. I thought this budget was in place.
We already.
Well, but for the fiscal year beginning July 1.
Ms. Parker.
Good afternoon. That's the Community Development Block Grant. This is the continuing care under the emergency solution grant. That's another pot of money.
Yes, but is not even the Trump administration's budget cuts this pot of money? Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
It is, but this is not under the housing portion of it.
Yes, ma'am. I was surprised to hear the response to one of my colleagues' questions that none of this funding was threatened. And I'd like, if you could please, to check back for our information to see whether, in fact, this program is recommended at 100% of its current funding by all the budgets that are knocking around in Congress. I would be shocked
We'll do
if
that.
it was not cut under for at least some of those proposals.
Okay.
And I think it's very difficult to predict what's going to pass, but I just wanted to make sure we weren't operating under an assumption that it was all sweetness and light on in Washington. Thank you.
Any more comments?
Councilmember Betts, we can check on that, but as of yet, we have not been notified that this was one pot of money that had been talked about or suggested. The only one that we were notified that could possibly be impacted was Community Development Block Grant, but we will check.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any more comments? Yes, City Attorney.
If you don't mind, is there a timing issue with respect to these grants? Is that perhaps what's going on in part?
You know, HUD's always exact in telling us about their timing. But what they had said was what was written here is that they had promised to issue the grant notice by June or early June, and typically the deadline's within 60 days. So it was possible that the deadline would be in early August. We're still waiting for that grant notice to come out any day. My colleagues believe that it's going to come out this week, and we'll have a deadline probably early August.
I think that point's well taken, is whether we're going to meet deadlines to bring this back to committee or to full council if we don't come back and meet till August.
This is
It's an action item.
This is the action item today.
It is an action. So we would go to the next council for vote for
Monday.
So our questions will get answered.
Yes.
But we're going to see it soon.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Need a motion. Any other comments?
I'll move to approve.
A second. It has been moved and properly seconded, and we're waiting. And we're voting. We have 2 yeses, yays, and 1 abstention. G3.
Item G3, resolution approving the fiscal year 2018 Housing and Community Development Program and authorizing submission of the 2017-2018 annual plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Mr. Brooks.
Yes, committee members. This item is to review and approve the FY18 Consolidated Housing and Community Development Program that's proposed for 2017-18, which is the last year of the 5-year plan. It will be submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development for their consideration. As you all know, we work on a 5-year cycle. This is the 5th year of the plan. It represents, as we've stated many times, a continuation of the ongoing programs that we have there included. We've attached a copy of the consolidated plan for you. In keeping with the conversation that we had, normally the annual plan is due to HUD by May 15th of each year. However, with the passage of a continuing resolution last fall, HUD directed grantees to delay submitting their annual plans until 60 days after HUD posted grant applications, but no later than August 16th. So the annual budget was signed into law on May 5th, and posting of grant allocations is expected to be about the first week of July. Therefore, the annual plan would be due August 16th, 2017. So this action is a request to approve the annual plan with the current allocations and authorize the city manager to make the appropriate adjustments once we find out what the funding would be. For your information, on the next page, we have for you what those allocations are currently for Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment, the ESG Emergency Solution Grant, and of course receiving about 2.5 in Continuum of Care funds. The activities, as you know, include principally housing rehabilitation, which includes the purchase rehab program. Home buyer demand in some of our areas have begun to pick up, and economic development activity, as well as hopefully being able to continue to fund some sub-recipient types of activities. So the plan is attached for your review, and we will try to answer any questions that you may have, but the program itself is what you have been accustomed to seeing. There are no major changes.
Any comments or questions? We need a motion.
Move approval.
Second. It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, press yes. We have 2 yeses and 1 abstaining.
Item G4.
Item G4, resolution awarding a consulting contract for a housing study and needs assessment.
All right, I've been waiting all my life for this item. Mr. Brooks.
How many years?
She said it, I didn't.
This action is awarding a contract for a comprehensive housing study and needs assessment and to authorize appropriate funding for it. This plan, of course, will be used as an assessment tool for the 5-year consolidated plan that is due to HUD in May of 2018. We're looking at current housing market data, resolution approving of funding affordable workforce housing policy, and other types of activities that would chart a path and a course for City Council to establish policy going forward. So we believe this will be the tool that will be very important for you guys to have as you look at the housing needs of the city. The Purchasing Department, along with Community Development, issued a request for proposals in March for the consultant. The scope of work encompassed the essentials of a comprehensive housing study, the requirements of the consolidated plan, and of course requests from council members. The scope of work and addendum of questions from prospective consultants are attached for your review. The proposals were due on April 17th, and 10 proposals were received, and we've summarized them for you. There was a panel that was comprised of city staff and various departments that reviewed the proposals and identified the top 4, which was Atria, Enterprise, HRNA, and RA and Ratio, RATIO. The community development staff checked the references and vetted all of these, and based on the criteria and the request for proposal, as evaluated by staff, the panel, and from interviews, Enterprise Community Partners submitted the most responsive and responsible package. So this agenda item would award the contract for the housing study to the Enterprise Community Partners and would appropriate $136,633 in community development and housing finance assistance funds to complete the study. The reason we are having a combination of funds because the study is a citywide study which would take us outside of the NRSA. So we have the housing finance funds for that particular reason.
Okay. This item appeared on yesterday on Finance Committee, which was on consent and was approved on the consent agenda. Are there questions or comments from the committee or Council President? Ms. Adams?
Just a comment. Again, Councilman Montgomery and some of us have been asking for this for a while. We're glad that we're doing it. Hopefully that it'll be able to benefit us in a way that we've never seen before, so that we can also be responsive to the constituents and citizens of Winston-Salem as to how we decide to do our housing policies within the city of Winston-Salem. I guess, and maybe I missed it, do we have any anticipated timeline as to when this may get done and be ready to come back to us with a report? Any idea? Just throw out a date.
It's 6 months.
I think
Okay.
the intent is to have this ready to start the process for the next 5-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bessie?
I would find it useful to have a summary of why staff concluded that the recommended contractor was the most responsible and responsive bidder, because that's not transparent in the materials that I'm.
We can provide that for you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I move for approval.
Is there a second? That's been moved and properly second, and I'll just add one additional comment, just saying thank you to staff for diligence in moving forward with this item. Again, as we look at our community, look at housing and quality of housing and how we make policy, being able to have qualitative and quantitative data to help us make informed decisions on policy and how we invest the limited resources that we have, I think is very, very important, and I hope that this will give this council additional information, and the community as a whole, additional information to help guide how we continue to improve the quality of housing and the appropriateness of housing in the community. So with that stated, there is a motion and a proper second. All in favor, vote by voting yes. Those opposed, no. That's unanimous. All right, item G5.
Item G5, ordinance amending UDO 277, proposed by Planning and Development Services, revising Chapter B, Article 4 of Unified Development Ordinance to amend historic overlay regulations to include additional small towns within Forsyth County.
All right.
Good afternoon, committee. Council. I'm going to be real brief. What this text amendment is for is actually, most of it deals with the county, to be honest. What we are doing in this is we are just about ready. We have applied for a grant, and no, not all those grants are, all of them are in danger. So, because we were supposed to hear last month, and we still haven't heard. But we are applying for a grant to do the architectural survey in the county at large and all the small towns. We have finished Winston-Salem. We did that first, and we're getting ready to move out there. I have been all around the county getting to see who wants to be involved and that sort of thing. What we discovered when we went through this process is that some of the smaller towns were not officially included to be covered by the Historic Resource Commission, the way the states and the feds have us set up through our certified local government programs. Winston-Salem has its own certified local government. Forsyth County at large, Kernersville and Clemens do. But where does that leave everybody else? So we are bringing in 4 of those smaller towns under the umbrella of the county. So what we're doing in this text amendment is just stating that and making sure that they have the right representation. The city's representation and categories on the Historic Resource Commission is not changing whatsoever. Some other language in our ordinance was changed to make it better replicate what's in the enabling legislation. We're not sure why we have it the way we had it. We want it to be the way it's supposed to be and what we're allowed to have. So otherwise, I'll take any questions, but that's basically what this text amendment is for.
Are there questions? Mr. Bessie?
Yeah, what board is it that hears and determines questions about the applications within the historic overlay districts, for example, with the historic districts?
That's the Forsyth County Historic Resource Commission. So this is, yes, their ordinance, correct.
I do wonder why jurisdictions which don't include any historic or historic overlay designated district are included as voting members of a board that makes decisions about such districts that are exclusively within other jurisdictions.
Right. 2 points on that. One is they also cover local historic landmarks, and we do have those all throughout the county and in some of these small towns. So that gives them that sort of contribution. We have one of the small towns, Bethania, is working on an HO right now. So at any point in time, they could add one of these districts. Probably not an H district, which is basically what we see at Old Salem and Bethabara. They would be that overlay district. But we could get one of those in Rural Hall or one of Kernersville, especially. They already have 2 National Register districts. The second part of it is we're very fortunate here in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County to have so much, and you know how I love to brag on that, but also to have so many experts kind of living and being around us that we have on our board. Most towns don't have that, and we have categorical seats. A lot of towns they just are looking for 10 people that are interested or 5 people that'll sit on this board. So it lets us give it an opportunity to kind of get that layman's perspective and not to have almost too much of a historic perspective. So it's always good to have that. You need the experts, but you also need the perspective of kind of the person living there. So sometimes that also is brought in when you include a larger area. But really it is because of the landmark situation and that they could be added at any time.
I just saw the breakdown. It's interesting that 5 to be appointed by the Forsyth Board of Commissioners will include representation for Bethania, Louisville, Rural Hall, and Walkertown.
Mm-hmm.
That's most of Forsyth County's representation.
Right, because at large, realistically, the county at large is not, and that's what they asked us for. So just FYI, when I went out, searching for support of this project, we met with the county manager, and he was like, Michelle, we need these guys to get skin in the game. And so you go out there and get skin in the game. And we talked about carrots and sticks. And he said, what can we give to these communities? He goes, let's give them representation. So that really came from, their management staff. But I didn't take anything away from the city. I made sure we were kind of still the same setup. So.
Right. All right. I see it now. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a comment along the same lines, and I'll come back to a couple others here. The question that you just raised in terms of layman representation, that kind of stuff, it looks here that the categories are taken out, that they're no longer
they're still in
the
here.
same way.
No, they're still in here. Look under. This is very hard to read because of the cross-outs. You cross out and what we're trying to do is, if you would take everything out that's going, it really will read better. But there are 6 categorical members, as there were before. We did not enlarge the HRC. You guys know that if you start getting a commission that's too big, it's unruly. So we tried to keep it at that 12, and there are 6 category, and there are 6 at-large members. The city, if you look under, I'm getting there, the new section B, kind of like right in the middle, and the city of Winston-Salem shall appoint 1 architectural historian or historic preservationist, 1 archaeologist, landscape architect, designer, planner, surveyor, or arborist, 1 H district property owner, and 1 HO district property owner.
Right, but then everyone goes to a place of 4-year term.
Everyone has a 4-year term, and they can be reappointed another term. How we're going to bring in new people is when the old people roll off.
Right, but in a sense of, is that not, just for clarity in terms of the way that the terms are set, is that not for it to be more rolling and that everyone isn't coming up at the same time for reappointment?
Right, and that's why we're going to, when someone rolls off, naturally we have that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to just continue. So when the next county person rolls off, we're going to start alphabetical order and look for somebody from the thing. And so that's kind of how we're going to do it. And all of the small towns were okay with that too. I mean, we've been very transparent about this. So, and to be quite honest, we lose people. We just had somebody resign the other day. So it's very staggered.
Right, and I was just saying about the term itself, but even if someone resigns, they would be replaced to fill an unexpired term of someone and not a new term.
Right, and we note that. We know if it's less than so much. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Ms. Larson?
I think you asked many of the questions I had. If I understand correctly, this does not change the number of board members.
No.
It does not change the number of appointments that are made by the city specifically.
Correct.
That the county appointments, which have been ongoing, will now include secondary cities that have not previously been appointed, but that will be at the option of the county commissioners.
Correct.
Yeah. And otherwise, the requirements for categories of professional services on the commission remain the same.
Correct.
All right. Any other comments, Mr. McIntosh? Okay.
I'm good.
I move for approval of the motion, of the resolution.
All right, been moved. Is there a second? Has been moved and properly second. It appears on your screen. Vote yes if you're in favor and no if you're opposed. All right.
And the winner is no.
That is unanimous.
I just have one question. Is this going to the August zoning board meeting?
It is. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. I'm not used to doing these text minutes. It went to the May 11th planning board meeting. So that was approved. And so you're talking about the city council zoning, wherever they put us. We were thinking August. So, but
If it hasn't been advertised, so I guess it'll be August.
yeah, okay, and that's fine. Again, we have not heard. Again, one of the main reasons is this grant approval process. We have not heard yet, so it's not going to hold anything up.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. With that, we have completed both the general agenda and the consent agenda. And so this is the last, we'll have a break in the month of July. So we will reconvene for our next Community Development and Housing General Government Committee meeting in August. We consider ourselves adjourned.